friend.
Welcome to Heavy Metal
History.
How's it going, listeners? Welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal History, the podcast, or should I say the Everything Went Black podcast. This was a Swapcast done with past and obviously current guest Mike Hill from the band Tombs, who does his own podcast called Everything Went Black. It's along the same lines of what we do, minus less history, but he gets on guys from bands and talks to them about a myriad of topics, and man, he has had such great interviews and podcasts. So we decided to record an episode and basically do a Swapcast. So if you're hearing this on the Everything Went Black channel, it's going to be exactly the same as what you're hearing on Heavy Metal History. Hopefully you'll check out his podcast, and likewise the listeners that are listening on his end will check us out and, you know, get a new podcast out of it. This is what it's about, supporting each other, getting some cool stuff. It was fun, man. I enjoyed having Mike back on. He was one of our first real guests to come on the podcast before, I started calling in favors some people that I knew, and it was a great episode. It was episode 7, I believe. So go back and check that one out. Mike talks about a lot of his influences and bands that inspired him, and real fun episode. If you're hearing all the noise and traffic, it's because I'm recording this intro outside on my roof. It's a very nice day out. I figured, why not? Anyways, that being said, enjoy this episode of the podcast. It was super fun. It's probably 2 hours long, man. We talk about all kinds of cool stuff. Mike's a cool dude. He's always fun to talk to, and it was nice to have him back on the podcast again. And don't forget to enter into our contest, guys. We are running this contest right now where we're giving away some autographed posters, and I have some band t-shirts I can give away too. So we're just going to try and give away some stuff to whoever shares an episode. So just go to our website or share us off iTunes or Spotify, whatever. Make sure you tag us in the post, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Doesn't matter which one, could be all three. For however many you do, however many likes you get, shares, whatever, it all counts to a cumulative tally, and whoever has the most will win. We'll reach out to you guys, whoever wins, and make sure we send that out to you. So yeah, we just want to pay it forward to our listeners. And if you're a new listener, fucking do it too. Why not? You could win an autographed poster. So we hope you guys enjoy this episode. Don't forget as well, we are sponsored by Death Dreamer, my buddy Scott's graphic novel. Go to www.deathdreamer.net. Sign up for his mailing list. Check it out. That's pretty much all we got. Go follow Mike on all his social media, all the Everything Went Black podcast stuff. That's all you gotta do is just add that, look for that on Facebook. Obviously, we'll link to it in our show notes. And thank you guys for listening. So here's the Everything Went Black Swapcast with Mike Hill.
Black hands across my heart. The taste of blood in my mouth.
Start off, man.
So the last time we spoke, you were living out in Portland. So you're back on the East Coast now, right?
Yes, I moved back to Tennessee where most of my family is. I had a bit of a tumultuous year, failed relationship, failed jobs, couldn't cut it there anymore, and just decided to leave it.
So where are you at now? Are you in did you move away or or what's
Yeah, I'm living with a friend in Tennessee. Just decided to move away from there and come back here. All my friends live here, so it's nice to like come back and have like a friend circle again. Um, it's been pretty nice being back here. The city's grown so much since I left. It's beautiful. There's so much to do here now. I love it.
Cool. So the podcast, Heavy Metal.
I was looking back on episodes, especially when you came on the podcast, and I realized it's been a little over a year since you were on, and you were about episode 7, I believe. So it's been about a year and a half now that we've been doing this.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Any favorite guests you had on there?
I'm always surprised by some of the people we can get, and I think my favorite that I've done so far this year was talking to John Hunt from Dead to Fall. Like he went like way down into the nitty gritty about their final album, Are You Serious? And just like told me everything about it, everything that he could possibly remember, what all the songs are about. It was about as in-depth as anybody could possibly get, and I was just like, this is exactly what I'm looking for the podcast, and it couldn't have been any better. I have one that I've recorded but haven't released yet with a band that's actually from New York. You might know Imperial Triumphant. Yeah, I got to talk with Ilya and Steve, and that was just a good conversation. We really just kind of like hit it off and started talking about like, I don't know, just like their kind of music that they were trained that isn't really metal, and they're just like movies, and it was fun. It was a nice one. So that one's gonna be out like closer towards July. Mm-hmm.
Brain, and I hadn't heard him before, and people were like, "Oh yeah, you got to check this band out. I think it's right up your alley." And definitely, they're a band that's right up my alley, man. They're awesome.
Yeah, their music is so dense and complex that it's like every time you listen to it, you kind of hear something new going on in the background, or some other instrument or layer that's there. I mean, their album that came out in 2015 is like 3 years old, and every time I listen to it, I'm still like, oh, that is like that instrument, and this guitar part accentuates this, and it's a nice. I love music like that you can like sit there and dissect. I thought I did. When I first went into it, I was like, this. I feel like this idea of going month by month, starting with Black Sabbath, and kind of dissecting and talking about all the albums that came out after that, it was a good idea. But I wasn't putting enough time into the research in the beginning, and we were just kind of getting like basic facts about albums. And when we would have guests on, it was more like, tell us about your favorite records, instead of like really talking about like the bands and what they're doing. So I think after about 6 months, we started to change that a little bit and get a lot more in depth with our research and everything, and make sure when we're doing interviews or have people in bands on that like we have more like conversations with them as opposed to just interviewing them outright. And it's kind of unfolded and worked a lot better. Because I did kind of, listening back to it, like we rushed into it like pretty hard, but I was so excited about the idea that I was like, man, we got to do this. We got to jump on this. And I'm kind of glad we did, because there's a lot of podcasts that popped up around us that could basically be the same thing.
A lot of the newer shows, especially since like big media companies are getting involved in doing things on the podcast sphere, and it's kind of important these days, I think, to kind of to have like a, sort of an idea about what you want to do, especially if you're starting something new, like from scratch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the base idea was very sound. Nobody had really, the only other podcast that was close is a guy that was like going into just the genres itself and not really like going album by album like we were. And I think I took that based off of like a lot of podcasts that I listen to kind of do that. I listen to like a lot of ones about TV shows or movies, and they go episode by episode or, year by year with something. And I thought that was a good format to kind of do this, especially for heavy metal. And the other thing that inspired it actually too was the Bill and Ted films, because in Bogus Journey, like Rufus is basically a heavy metal history teacher, and I love that idea. I was like, man, that's like, I love Bill and Ted. Why not do that?
Just
Yeah, so what we did is we started with Black Sabbath, their first record, and kind of just went through everything they put out up to 1980. So our first 2 episodes are just purely all about Black Sabbath. I do wish we did a little more research into those episodes, obviously in hindsight. We even recorded them twice. But then we picked up with January of 1980. So what we did after that is we just kind of went month by month for a year and just talked about every album that came out in that month. So then we went on to 1987, started in January of 1987. We just finished up 1987 last year, and now we decided to kind of jump ahead to 1998. We've been going all over with the years now just because we kind of looked at it and we were like, oh man, if we go in just like strictly linear order, I don't think a lot of people are going to be super into like talking about all this old stuff right off the bat. Like we can go back to it once we kind of got people interested in the concept. So now we're on 1998, where we just recorded our May episode of 1998, and working our way through a lot faster this year. I think now that my life has settled down a little bit, we can we're way more consistent with our release schedule, and I got all the research done probably within like 2 weeks, and it's like really in depth. And I would like message bands and be like, hey, I'm doing a thing about this record. Any information you can give me or send my way would be greatly appreciated. And like, I've got some answers. I've gotten some, just no replies, or I've looked up books that have information in it. And I'm trying to do a lot more in-depth kind of coverage of the stuff. And so that's kind of where it's at right now. Totally. Thank you. Yeah, I try.
Skipping because you mentioned the 80s, okay? So now, are you going to be covering stuff like Cinderella and all that sort of stuff too?
We are.
You are? Okay, cool.
Just because, like, while it's not like on the extreme end of metal, it still kind of has its place in the scene, even though it kind of gets looked down upon and talked shit about. And I get it. I'm not like a super big hair metal fan. I like some of it, but I'm not going to sit there and ignore it like it didn't exist or wasn't a part of the genre, because it was.
Yeah, I think this was the greatest band in the world, but it's like I kind of started listening to hardcore around that time, like Crew, like I was into like Bad Brains and all this other kind of stuff, and it was really, but I still was like kind of nodding my head to it. I'm like, yeah, this is actually kind of like all right, but I hated hair metal for most of my life, with the exception of Guns N' Roses, who I consider to be a different type of band. They're a rock band, like a hard rock band, and
yes. I agree.
A former drummer that I played in Tombs was a huge hair metal fan, and I think that in the last like couple of years, I kind of warmed up to that genre a little bit, because we would listen to, we would have like a couple hours on the road in the van, like listening to like obscure stuff like Vane, and bands like that. And
Okay.
and now it's like I'm kind of like into like LA Guns, and I look back a little bit more forgiving on some of that music, and I don't know, it's just an interesting kind of take on it.
No, I kind of feel the same way too, because I know growing up I wasn't really into it either. I still to this day just like really, really don't like Guns N' Roses, and it's not because I think that like they're bad musicians or anything. I just think it got really overplayed for me at a certain point in my life.
Yep, definitely.
So I just can't. But if you look at like a lot of those guitar players that were in those bands, they're solid guitar players. They're no slouches at what they do, and they were in that era of like guitar solos were everything, and I think that goes a long way. Yep.
Just listening back to some of the stuff, kind of revisiting it, and like I started out biased against it anyway, but I was like, man, it's like the actual songs themselves were pretty poorly written, except if you were like the vocalist, and then there was like some shred guitar solo that happened, and it was like, oh, okay, cool, there's like a guitar solo, but I couldn't really tell you how the guitar part went in like Lay It Down by Rat. You know what I mean? Like I can't really hum that. I can sing the chorus, but I can't really recall what the guitar part sounds like in that song. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think the only two guitar riffs that people can kind of remember by Rat are the one from Round and Round, and She's Only 17, probably.
Actually, She's Only 17, I believe that's Winger.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, that is Winger.
I'm embarrassed that I know that.
No, that's fine. I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure that was wrong. Like as soon as it came out of my mouth.
So you mentioned with Sabbath, it was like you ended at 1980.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to pick up like the sort of dark years in the 90s?
We've actually already done a couple episodes that have gone into the Dio years and the vocalists after that. Unfortunately, I cannot remember their names.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
But yeah, we've covered those. They're very interesting, man. It's we've talked about this a few times where it's like, at what point does a band stop coasting off their name and just stop what they're doing and just start something new with the same members? I know it's hard to give it up, but there should have been a point where Black Sabbath was like, or Tony Iommi should have just been like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just tarnishing the name here. But I mean, eventually, when they got all the original members back, it didn't really matter after that point. It was like, all right, Ozzy's back. They put out, those last albums, and it was just business as usual. So it just kind of like, I don't know, it didn't really matter that they went on with those other vocalists.
Yeah, it's
to me.
It's kind of weird because it's like that's kind of like the move in like that old school like heavy metal world, where like it's really like Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. It's Richie Blackmore. They've had a whole bed of different including Ronnie James Dio and Graham Bonnet.
Yeah.
Joe Lynn Turner and like all these names and different players. And I think at one point Black Sabbath, I think it was the Headless Cross record, where it was Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. There might have been some like Sharon Osbourne thing where you had to differentiate that this record was different than the ones that Ozzy sang on or something like that. But
wow,
it's kind of a fascinating story, man, because I mean, I guess the story goes that Sabbath is never going to perform live again. You know what I mean? So it's like the end of this like epoch of heavy metal music with that sort of final tour and all that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because of like they're all getting up there in age and everything, but I mean, what a way to go out too. I saw some of those like clips online, and I was just like astounded that they were still just going as hard as they did probably when they were like 18, 19 years old.
And that
Yeah,
dude,
I think you're right.
that dude really needs to retire. I feel, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've heard stories that like before he goes on stage, like he's just so he has a hard time walking, and his bones and joints are just going. But when he's out on stage, he's just like it's like nothing's wrong with him, and I find that really interesting that he can just flip that switch like that, and he knows like I got to put on this show, body pain be damned, like I'm here to perform. That's
On stage, and recently I saw Judas Priest, and like Halford sounded amazing. Rob Halford, you can't fuck with Rob Halford singing, but like he just looked a little decrepit, like physically. You know what I'm trying to say?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, shoot, that band's been around for such a long time, too. It's just crazy to me that they, it's 2018, and here they are still putting out albums. I never would have imagined that.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage of the game, it's really just Rob.
Yeah.
American guy playing lead guitar, and that guy's great. He's like totally shreds, and I don't know. It's like I think as time goes on, I'm more forgiving of like these kind of like legacy like tours, and I think I used to be a little more critical of stuff when I was like a lot younger, and because like when Sabbath reformed, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, oh man, this is like some cash grab, like. But at the end of the day, it's like if they sound good, if they go out there and do a good set and you're enjoying yourself, it's like, when are you going to get a chance? I was definitely too young to see like the Ozzy era of the band. So it's like, seeing some sort of like version of that, even if, it's mostly original members except for the drummer when I saw him. And it was like, what's wrong with that? You know what I mean? It's all in good fun. And that's kind of like the sort of attitude I have about it these days.
Yeah, I've noticed myself getting that way too, because I'll listen to stuff or hear stuff, and I think about when I was like 20, 21, and how I would immediately just dismiss anything that wasn't inside my little circle of what I like to listen to, or even just bands that like change members. I would just write them off like super quick, and I don't do that at all anymore. I always give something a fair listen, even if I have to listen to it like 2 or 3 times, and I'll finally be like, okay, I get this album now. I get why they added this member or this member left. It's, I don't know, man. I think there's just so much good music out there too. I don't want to deprive myself of that anymore. And I did that for years.
Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, they all had out.
Yeah.
And so their playing and all that stuff had to be completely on point. You know what I mean? They had to be like a band that you can record live and have people enjoy that music and be like, wow, it sounds great. And honestly, man, it's like seeing that performed this day and age is like, it really puts perspective on maybe a little bit of the mediocrity I feel like some bands bring to the table, you know what I mean, that are big. Like, for example, I saw Iron Maiden last summer, and Ghost opened for them. And Iron Maiden, like, these are like men of advancing years at this point, you know what I mean? And they ripped so hard, and they sounded like a well-rehearsed, totally on point live band. And I gotta say, Ghost, a little underwhelming to me. You know what I mean? I thought they weren't really that great live, and a lot of the stuff that they did, I felt like might have even been on tracks. I don't know. It's kind of a underwhelming experience seeing Ghost live. And I know they're huge and people love that band, but I don't count myself as a fan of that type of band.
Yeah, they just actually played here not even 2 weeks ago. I didn't go see them because I'm kind of in your same boat. Like I get what they do, and I definitely see why people like them, but I just don't get it. I don't like it personally.
Yeah.
So I can see how like them opening for Iron Maiden just being like ridiculously underwhelming.
He's singing louder because he's like standing still. Now he's like running across the stage and jumping on this like pyramid, and it's like, okay, yeah, he sounds different. And it wasn't so much, it was just about the raw experience of live music with that band. And it's not this like perfect kind of simulation of the record, which I think is what Ghost is going for. But the ironic thing about it is that the band that is going for the raw live experience, if you were to record that band and then play it against the band that's going for the simulation of the record, the raw live band, I think, wins out every single time.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I've even talked to a couple guys recently too that they talked about like when they're writing songs for the record, they leave spots open so that way when they play live, they can actually kind of like just riff, like kind of freestyle off that riff or solo or whatever. So that way when somebody sees them live, it's different from the record to kind of add that extra like layer of unpredictability to it. And I was like, damn, that's such a good idea. Like, I don't know why more bands don't do that. No, I never got to see them, but I definitely listened to them.
Like 70s rock. I'm a fan of that whole era, and like I feel like the Devil's Blood really were Scorpions or, you know, Merciful Fate with like incredible vocals and great guitar playing and all that sort of stuff. And I saw them on that tour they did with Watain and Behemoth, and it was the same kind of vibe where I'm like, man, these versions of the songs are different, man. It's like there's like space in there for like improvisation, and there was like, you know, longer guitar solos, and like I was saying, it was like seeing the Scorpions play like back in like the late 70s or something. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's a really awesome thing to do. I definitely think more bands should think outside the box a little bit like that. But I get to like wanting to put on what you recorded because that's what people expect to hear too. You know, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting little thing, and I was like, damn, I don't know why I never like paid attention to that either. I know there's been times where I've seen a band and I've been like, wait, that song sounds different, but not really thinking like, oh, they probably did that on purpose. No, I absolutely am a big proponent of talking about punk and hardcore because I think they're basically related. You know, they're cousins. I know some of our earlier episodes, because we couldn't find a lot of heavy metal records, I was like, okay, well, let's start going into punk and hardcore. And, you know, we talked about like some Bad Brains records, I think, and Black Flag. I think coming up on like our 1998 stuff, I got Madball. I think a Hatebreed record is on there. Maybe I'm thinking of 97. But there's definitely like some hardcore in there because I love hardcore. That was like the first thing that like really got me into metal anyways, and I've always been more on the punk hardcore side of things anyways. So yeah, I'm definitely adding that into the lexicon for sure.
And so I think that's why, like for me, I was always more drawn to the like more metallic, like hardcore punk type music. You know what I mean? Like the Bad Brains, I love. You know, I love Black Flag and you know, Suicidal, which is, you know, more on that crossover like world. But yeah, so I don't know, it's cool. It's funny how a lot of people are. Well, I would say a high percentage of people start listening to punk and then they just find themselves on the heavy metal side of the fence. You know, no, I was just saying, it's just kind of weird because like back in the day, it was like, there was like a division between punk and hardcore, you know, like a real
Yes.
very, very well defined, you know, two sets of distinct people that, you know, were two very different scenes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you pretty much took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say that too, because it was always interesting to me, because even kind of when I was growing up, there was still that a little bit. It was like, you know, you can't listen to punk rock and metal, and I was like, why not? You know, but it was like these kids somehow, you know, and this is in like 2001, that these kids still adopted this weird mentality of like, you can only listen to this one genre of music and you can't go to the other side. And I was just like, fuck that. I'm listening to whatever I want. You know, I watched like basically like the Cliff Notes versions of them. I've dialed back like how many fights I watched just because I've gotten so burnt out. I pretty much only watch the main cards now.
Yeah.
Or if there's some crazy finish on like the Fox Sports cards or something like that, and I'll watch like recaps just so I can see what happened.
You know, watch a bunch of the grappling stuff they have available, and yeah, I don't know how I fit it in, man, but somehow I do. You know.
No, I used to be that way like all the time, and then I think just like past 2 years, man, I don't know what happened. I think I just got really, really burnt out on it. Like always watching fighting, and I was, you know, because I've been watching since I was in like 7th grade. And I was like 15 then, 14, 15, and I'm 31 now, so that's a long time. But it was always funny to me too, like how I started watching, because a buddy of mine had basically bootleg cable. So he got like all the pay-per-view channels for free, and one night he was like, hey, have you guys ever seen like Pride fighting? We're like, no, what is that? He's like, oh, like UFC. And we're like, what is that? He's like, you guys need to come over to my house. I'm going to show you some shit. And I don't remember exactly what Pride card it was, but I know it was one of like the legendary ones, you know, with like one of the Grand Prix going on. Definitely a Crow Cop fight on there for sure. I remember that, but I don't remember which one. And just like, yeah, man, because like MMA was really sparse back then, so it'd be like every 3 months we'd go over to his house on a Saturday and watch like whatever Pride or UFC was on for pretty much all through junior high and high school. It was pretty sweet. I agree. That probably would have helped in that fight last night. That's for damn sure.
Do you mean you're talking about the Darren Till Wonderboy Thompson fight? Well, how do you did you watch the entire fight, or you just watch the highlights of it?
I watched the highlights, but then I went back and I was like, all right, I'm gonna check out like the whole thing just so I can get like a little better idea, because you know highlights only show you so much.
Right.
Ah, man, I don't know, man. Wonderboy has like this weird. He's got that Machida style, and I think people are like, even though it's different karate, people are still a little bit wise to it, and they don't want to engage him. And I think it makes him look bad on the scorecards, even though he's like doing damage to the other guy. He's just really precise about it, and I don't know. I just don't think it works in his favor. Even in those Woodley fights, like it didn't work in his favor both times. No.
Wonderboy still did whatever the hell he wanted. It's like when you are controlling the cage, you're backing somebody up into a corner, or you're backing somebody up into against the cage, or you're cutting them off, or you're like controlling where they're going. But Wonderboy just played the outside game, and I just think that Till was just too slow to really catch him.
Yeah, he's got that counter-striking thing too, man. And that if you don't engage, you can't counter-strike. So it's just like it's a hard fight no matter what. I mean, they all know he's going to try for some spinning kick or some, like what Machida pulled off against Vitor a couple weeks ago. Like, he's got those kicks, man, and they're dangerous. So I think everybody's just wise to it. It's the only problem. it they've been focusing on like Till missing weight a little too much, and then just the bad scoring instead of like what actually took place during the fight. It feels like, at least from what I've been reading. But yeah, I mean, dude, it shows how much Wonder Boy's been really working on all aspects of his game. The fact that he was able to take him down like that. Yeah.
I'm sure helped him out with his grappling. So actually, you know what?
He's kind of.
I never determined this, but you're in a band prior to, like, are you still touring or playing music, or what's? I didn't really ever fully determine that about you.
Yeah, so it's really weird. It's actually coming up on 10 years when I did my very first tour.
Yeah.
Basically, how it started is there was actually a local band from here where I'm at called With Faith or Flames, and I was friends with all those guys. And they had an album coming out that had a bunch of hype, and they got on this tour with Kill When You Dead, Salt the Wound, Dance Club Massacre, and Carnifex. For 2008, that was like a pretty big tour, I guess. I don't know. But they brought me along on that tour, and we had some unfortunate... I was doing merch for them, and just general crew work, loading in and out gear, the usual stuff, counting of the money. Basically, near the end of the tour, we had a little trailer snafu, and we couldn't really continue on with the rest of the tour, so we were pretty close to home, so we decided to basically abandon the trailer, go back home. And I was kind of bummed about it for a few days, but I knew the tour was going to be finishing off fairly close to here, so me and a friend drove up to that show. It was in North Carolina, and I just got to talking with all the Carnifex dudes, and they were like, hey, our merch guys, he doesn't want to tour anymore after this, and we need somebody new. Like, are you down? And I was like, fuck yeah, you kidding me? Like, of course. Say no more. So yeah, I mean, pretty much from there, I toured with them for about 5 years until 2012, and I did like a couple shows in 2013 until they went on a little bit of a hiatus. Yeah, that was quite a few years, so good times. Yeah. Yeah, I love that they've, at least for me, they've really, I don't want to say they're strictly deathcore anymore. Like, yeah, they still have the breakdowns every now and then, but they've done a really good job of changing their style to being like this blackened death metal with breakdowns. I don't know what to call it. It's just, I feel like they're a cut above most deathcore bands because they're not just playing purely breakdowns anymore, which I guess that's still a thing that people do nowadays. Oh yeah.
To a better place, and I think that as a band, that I see them more going into like maybe a Gojira kind of vibe than like some of the other bands in that scene. And it's just not my I mean, I like them. I go see them play live. I listen to their records, and But the scene, the style of music is just not really my cup of tea. You know what I mean? And Carnifex is all right though. I watched their set because that was a band a lot of people were talking about.
Yeah, their stage show, that was a cool thing that they added over the past couple of years. It's a nice little addition to like their whole repertoire, and it fits the music, I think. But yeah, I don't know, man. Deathcore is weird. Like when I was younger, I was super into it, and then I was like, this is cancer music. I don't ever want to touch or listen to it again. So I stopped listening to it for a long time, and then over the past couple of years, like I'll hear newer bands every now and then, and I'll listen to them to kind of check them out. But I don't go out of my way to like not support. I don't want to say support, but I don't know. I just don't. I passively listen to it, I guess. I'm not like embedded in it anymore. Yeah.
Really like, and it's like I was watching them play. I didn't enjoy their music, but I can see why people respond to it, though. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm trying to, I'm not trying to just come off like some elitist or anything like that, but it's like, it's not my thing. But on the positive side, I can understand why people really respond to their music because it's like, it's well done. And I think they have like a vibe that appeals to their crowd. You know what I'm trying to say? Like they know where to put the breakdowns.
Yeah.
They got the the 8-string guitars and all that sort of stuff. And it's like very much like a crowd sort of a participation sort of show. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, having toured with those kind of bands for so long, I remember what it was like seeing like all those beat down pits and just breakdown after breakdown all night.
Yeah.
It's something else, man, but I don't know, it gets really boring after a while to me. That's kind of the reason I just stopped listening to it. It wasn't catching my ear anymore.
Like music and some of the T-shirts like that band Immure. I think they're part of that scene.
Oh yeah.
I've seen it. I saw a bunch of kids wearing Immure T-shirts, and I was like, with some like awful sayings on them, and I'm like, wow, that's like the kind of shirt that a dude who has never touched a woman's breast would wear. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, I remember we've played a couple shows with them like way back when, and I had the same sentiment where like I saw their shirts and I was just like, who the fuck would wear this?
yeah.
Like it just really, like the one that I always remember is it was like I think it was like a yellow shirt and it said, "Ask your girl what my dick tastes like." I was just like, fuck. Oh my God. So gross. Yeah.
I was splitting a table with my buddy CJ who does Rice and Dreams clothing, and we were exiled into the small room at the Worcester Palladium, which is where just our luck. Primarily in the whole bill, the whole like lineup was all deathcore bands, and with the exception of Misery Index, who totally fucking shredded when we saw them, but. It was just a nonstop stream of people wearing shirts like that, and just like this kind of very ignorant kind of knuckle dragging sort of flavor to that evening. You know what I'm trying to say? So yeah, I don't know. It was a little bit much for me.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that scene hasn't changed that much. Probably a bad thing, I would think.
I mean, the one thing I could say,
not far off from how it was when I was doing it.
The one thing I can say is that it probably is like an entry point for a lot of younger kids to get into metal. Taste, like doesn't really. Now, later on in life, when I look back on it, there's definitely some bands I was really into when I was like a young kid that I'm definitely not into now. That just the novelty of being into that kind of stuff like opened me up to different styles of music.
Yeah, and I think you need bands like that as you kind of go along, because it shows you not only like what's kind of status quo, but it also lets you know that there's better stuff out there. And I think those bands are equally as important as the good ones or the bad ones or even the run-of-the-mill ones. It's like a nice little gamut there.
And the opening band on that bill was this band Moontooth, who was
Oh, they're awesome.
oh, they're great, man. They're like this totally different, like 3 completely different bands are on that bill. And it was, Moontooth was, first of all, Nick, the guitar player in that band, is a rock god. Like, that guy is like one of the meanest guitar players I've ever seen live, man. That dude is like, he plays in that band Riot. You remember that old heavy metal band?
No.
Oh man. Oh, okay. Riot actually is one
I'll have to check them out.
They're a early metal blade band, and they are like a hard rock band, like old school. And Nick joined the band. He's a young guy. It's like we were talking about before. There's like all these that have like these young dudes playing in them, and he's a guitar player in this band Riot. Which anyone out there, if they want to check out some good hard rock music, check out Riot. And so he's on that level, man. He's like this like Randy Rhoads, kind of like old school style player, and then he's playing in this like super progressive band. And like listening to them play every night, I was like, yeah, this is like I can name like 10 different bands that I like that are mixed into what they're doing, and that's always a good thing, instead of it being like, all right, cool, this band sounds like Morbid Angel, whatever, this band sounds like Agnostic Front or something. You know what I mean? You could pick out like the 1 or 2 records these guys are into. But with Moontooth, it's like, I'm like, man, what are these guys even into, man? Like, what kind of, like, I heard all these different elements in their music, and when I went to go talk to the dudes in the band, I was like, oh yeah, you guys like sound like, Shudder to Think, and they're like, oh, I never heard them, man. Are they any good? And I'm just like, oh yeah, check them out. But it's like, and that's always good, man, when you don't know where people are coming from. And that was, they were awesome. You're familiar with them too, so.
Yeah. I think, like you said, that guy's guitar playing, like, I'm very risk adverse when I first listen to a band, especially if they have singing, and it's supposed to be like a little bit more metal. So it takes me a solid like 4 or 5 times listening
To a record, like I have to force myself to listen to it. It's a weird thing I do. I was like not super into it at first because of the vocals, and I was just like digging the hell out of his guitar playing. But then once I listened to it more and I realized how much in tandem those two things go and how much his vocals complement the playing style, I was like sucked in after that. And I would always be like showing people them or like trying to play it at work, be like, yo, you gotta check out this band. They're just like fun. They got a good energy about them too. Like when you listen to those songs, they're just like fun songs.
Yeah, they're all great musicians, which is always great players that write good songs, and like it's especially when the material is like unnoticeably technical. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
It's like you're not really. It's not like, okay, we're playing these odd times and playing these crazy scales and stuff, and you notice that. But when you're listening to the song and it's just like a good rock song, and then when you listen to it for like, I was on tour with them, so like the 15th time I've seen them play on that tour, I was like, oh wow, they're doing these like cool little things here. I'm like, the drummer's playing this part like that, and I'm like, it's almost like, it's a totally different type of band, but like Soundgarden, how they would have these like disguised like technical timing things going on in their songs, and that's kind of what Moontooth does, I think.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they do with their new material they're working on, or I think is done, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong.
Yeah, they just wrapped up the studio. I ran into Nick about a month ago maybe, and he was saying that how they're basically wrapping up. So yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, that's that was cool. And that was an odd tour. 3, totally different bands, and and that crowd was like weird, but it's all good.
As I know I was gonna say earlier too, I agree with you about Fit for an Autopsy. How they're doing a really good job of trying to like push the genre a little bit into a different direction, but also their sound. I think with every record they put out, they've evolved more and more and more. And it's always a treat to like hear the records, because I remember listening to that first record and it was pretty straightforward deathcore, and then the next one came out and it was way different, and then the one after that was way different, and this new one's way different. So I really admire that they've taken chances on every record, because not a lot of bands will do that or can do that.
Yeah, and it's like the thing is those guys are like a little bit older than a lot of the other bands that are in that scene too. I mean,
yeah,
Pat, the guitar player, he's like an older guy, and they used to, before they had Joe Bad singing for them, they had this guy Nate Johnson, Nate used to be in Premonitions of War, which is like seriously killer heavy like metallic hardcore band from Ohio. That so it's not,
they were like one of my first bands I got into.
Yeah, they were great, right there. That's the record on Victory, and it was like they're a great band, and there's like a little bit more depth, I think, to like the band than say some of the others that were just like a bunch of dudes trying to play deathcore. You know what I mean? And I don't want to slam, but like you know what I'm saying, right? It's just like
yeah. No, I get you there. Yeah, there's no reason to like throw people under the bus.
Exactly. Except for Amur and their T-shirts and just that ignorance, which is something that like I don't know that I'm very open-minded and have like a very like wide bandwidth of things, and I'm not offended by it much, but like that shirt just bummed me out, dude. There's some levels of ignorance that I just can't get behind, you know what I mean? And I made me like really think that band like was kind of like lowest of the lowest common denominators out there.
Yeah, I've never really been a fan of them. I think between like the singer's personality and those shirts and the music, I was just kind of like, I'm good. I don't need to waste my time or my ears on this.
I haven't even heard them. I don't even know what they sound like. Like I just know that they're a band and they have shirts like that, and I think I saw a photograph of them one time, and that was about it. I don't know what any of their music sounds like. So I don't know. It's on me.
I gotta ask, man, because I know when you were on my podcast, I know this is like a little Swapcast here, but I didn't really get to ask you too much about Tomb stuff, because I know you were in like the early stages of kind of releasing or working on the Grand Annihilation. But I know one thing, we kind of like to do now is like really get into the history of bands and stuff like that. And, I know listening to your podcast, you've talked about like your previous band Anodyne a lot too. Oh, yeah. And you've done like that audio book, which is rad.
Cool.
At this point, it's been a year since Grand Annihilation came out almost, right? In June?
Basically, yeah. We're almost in June now. So yeah, the record came out in June. So it's been about a year. Yeah.
How does it feel being like a year removed from that? I've always wondered, you put all this work into it and now you're like a year removed from the thing being released. Like, does it still kind of feel fresh and new to you, or is it just kind of marinated a little bit more into like just the status quo of the band?
It's pretty much, all those songs seem ancient to me at this point, because like, the record came out a year ago. So like we started writing it like over the year prior to that, you know what I mean? So it's like some of those songs have existed in one form or another for at least 2 years, and the songs themselves and like the execution of those songs are very old to me now, and actually way past it at this point. I mean, we actually have almost like 5 songs written brand new, so I'm always going forward anyway. And we toured. We did like several U.S. tours last year on that material, And I've played most of those songs into the ground at this point, I feel like, you know.
Yeah, I remember, dude, because when you guys were going to play Seattle, and I drove all the way up there with my ex, and as soon as we get there, I get an email saying the show is canceled, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yes.
Like, we just drove all the way here.
That was on the Darkest Hour tour. I remember that. We were in Reno.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, what's even worse for us is, like, we actually just got on. We just joined up with that tour because we started that tour in Reno. And we Rotten Sound was on the first leg of the tour, and then Rotten Sound went back to Finland, and we took over for them, you know, their slot on the tour, and started it in Reno. So, you know, Reno, horrible place, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, so we did a couple of dates out to Reno, and then the next 3 days got canceled due to, like, not being able to get across the mountains. You know, and we had the Seattle show, Portland show, and we had a just a headlining Tombs date in, I think, on Grants Pass. Is that a place in Oregon? It's like a smaller town.
Yeah.
Yeah, Grants Pass. We were supposed to play there, and you know, and that sucks. You have 3 days off in a row, and you're stuck in Reno, Nevada, and then you can't. Then even we stayed in Reno. I remember over that night. We stayed at that time Ken Sorceron was playing guitar on that tour with us, and stayed at one of his buddies' houses, and then we tried to we drove across the mountains, and it was still, like, pretty treacherous, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was, like, times where, like, man, I don't know if this is such a good idea to try to cross the mountains, but it was a real thing, man. It wasn't like, yeah, we don't feel like going to the Northwest. It was like a legit state of emergency, and you could not get across the mountains, and it was pretty scary, actually. Like, once we got into the mountains themselves, it was like ice, real treacherous situation, man. So yeah, it was a thing. It wasn't just like some frivolous, like, cancellation of the shows.
Totally. I understand that, like, 1,000%, man. I always remember winter tours were, like, the most treacherous. And gosh, there was a Canadian tour we did in the winter once, and that was literally every drive. Nobody could sleep because everybody was scared of either hitting a moose or just driving off the road because of black ice. It was not a fun 2 or 3 weeks that we were up there. So I get it.
Actually, you know, speaking about hitting, you know, animals, we like a long time ago, before I was even in Anodyne, I was playing in this hardcore band, and we played Hellfest when Hellfest used to be in Syracuse, New York. We played that, and you know, we were based in Boston. It was the years I was living in Boston, and we were driving back, and I was asleep in the van. Everyone was asleep, and we were on I-90, which is like an interstate highway, and some dude was driving, and, like, you know, everyone's passed out, tired, and I wake up, boom. There's like the van smashes into something, and I'm jarred awake, and I get up and I look, and the windshield is covered with blood, right? And I was like, what the fuck, man? I was like, I thought someone got murdered, or like we're getting abducted by aliens or something. I don't know, like some crazy shit. You like wake up out of a dead sleep. And apparently, so we pulled the van over, and like some big deer with like horns, you know, like the big antlers and everything. Like, it was like, according to the driver, you know, and this is what I was told later, that the deer was like running alongside the van and tried to cut across, and smashed into the van and just totally demolished the radiator. So we were like basically stuck on the side of the road. So like the van was like covered in blood, and like we walked back to like to check out the deer and the carnage, you know what I mean? And the deer is just like fucked, like destroyed, dude. And I was just like, wow. That's like what happens when you're doing like 70 miles an hour and some animal like steps in front of the car, man, or the van in this case, you know. And that was like, you know, a pretty harrowing experience. And you know, we were supposed to play the next night in Boston, and I'm pretty sure we missed the show, but it was like we were stuck in whatever town in like New York State overnight, and we had to get towed to get it fixed because you can't drive a vehicle without a radiator. So.
Yep.
Yeah, wreckage stories, man. Like, definitely be careful out there.
Yeah, that was always one of the most terrifying things to me. I already have like bad sleeping problems, and I think they just got worse over the years because of how many things like you would see people like falling asleep at the wheel a little bit and just veering off, and you notice the vans veering. You can feel it, or hitting little things in the road, or tires blowing out. And gosh, I remember one time this truck, like an 18-wheeler, got too close to us and ripped off the fender on our trailer, and just like everybody thought the whole thing was going to flip over. And man, that was pretty fucking scary. Tire got blown out too on it.
Oh yeah, man. Blowouts are the things that terrify me the most, and thankfully I've never experienced that in a vehicle that I've been traveling in as a blowout. You know what I mean? Like, I've had flat tires and ice storms and like running off the road and all that kind of stuff, but never like a blowout. Like, that thing is like terrifying to me.
You ever ran out of gas?
Yes, actually, I ran out, not on tour, actually, oddly enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I ran out of gas. Actually, this is really funny, man. Like, I was coming back. It was a while ago. I was going to my parents' house, and it was late at night, and they live outside of New York City and above Westchester County. And anyone out there who lives in like the White Plains area might be familiar with this. But like, I'm driving up across it's a Route 684, and I realized that like, oh man, I should have filled up on gas. You know what I mean? Before I did this like little voyage. And there's like there's a stretch of highway where there's not a single gas station, or there are gas stations, but they all close. Like, they close early.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out the hard way which ones did and which ones didn't, because what happened was there'd be a sign for like a Texaco station, and I'm like, all right, cool, get off, drive like 8 miles out of the way, closed, drive 8 miles back to the highway, continue. Now I'm getting to, let's see what the town was. I think it was, I don't know, Katona or something like that. And I'm like, oh man, it's been on like empty for like the past like 20 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like I know that I'm really running out of gas, because you're on E, and you could squeeze like 10 miles or 15 miles out of that sometimes. And
yeah, if you're lucky.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like, when you really push it. And I'm like, I've been on
Yeah.
E for like a while, and I'm like, any minute now, this van is gonna just like run out of gas. And sure enough, once I got into Katona, I was like, oh man, yeah, I heard it I started losing power, and I gas, and I had to call AAA, and that was a real drag. It was late at night as it was.
At least you had AAA. That's extremely helpful.
You have to have AAA if you're doing this stuff, man. It's like.
Yeah.
That saved my ass so many times over the last 2 decades of my life, man, having AAA. What about you? You ever run out of gas?
Yeah, there was 2 times that I know of. The one that I remember most was like, we were going somewhere in Arizona, and there was just a long stretch of highway where apparently there was no gas station, and we didn't know this. So whoever was driving, we did actually stop at a gas station before we got on this long stretch of road, and he was like, we'll be fine, we'll drive another 30 minutes and I'll get gas. And this was kind of before, GPSs were a big thing, or even phones that you could look up, like if there was gas stations, still in the early days a little bit. So we start driving down the highway, and one of the other bands we're on tour with is kind of like right next to us, and we're like fucking around with them between the windows, like mooning them and throwing piss bottles and all that shit. And the next thing we know, we start slowing down, and we're like, why are we slowing down? And we hear Corey in the front. He goes, fuck. And we're like, what's going on? He's like, we just ran out of gas. Everybody's like, Corey, like, come on, man, like, how did you not get gas? And he's like, well, I thought there'd be a gas station closer. And luckily, because the other band was next to us, we had them drive to a gas station to get us gas, and then come back, fill that up, and then drive to that gas station, it was still a pretty good ways away. I think it was like a good 10 or 15 miles, if not more.
Oh yeah, man. That I'm well aware of that stretch of country, man, because that's like where I learned like a long time ago. I learned that you never let the gas gauge get below a half a tank in that part of the world. You know what I mean? It's like I remember a long time ago. This is when with Anodyne when we were touring. We pushed it a little bit. It was like, oh cool. There's a gas station coming up. We're on like just above E, and we pull in, and like the gas station was like maybe 20 years ago there was a gas station there. It was like one of these like it had a mobile sign, but it was a completely abandoned like building. You know what I mean? You might have run into this stuff in that part of the country too, because there's shit like that everywhere in like New Mexico, West Texas, and like Arizona. There's like, yeah, man, like 20 years ago there used to be a mobile station here, and so we're like, what are we gonna do, man? Like we're like, and then it said something like 60 miles away was like the next fuel, like on the highway. Once we got back on the highway, they'll say things like that. They'll be like next fuel like 40 miles or something. You know what I mean? So we knew that we had a stretch, and we were just above E, man, and like, or maybe it wasn't 60 miles, but I just remember like stressing out, and it was during the day, and it was the desert, and it was summertime, and it was just like there was no water in the van, of course, so I remember feeling dehydrated too, and just getting that weird, oh man, my eyes are so dry, and I have a headache, and like, so what's going on? I'm like, this must be what dehydration feels like, but I wasn't sweaty, because it was evaporating, it was so dry. And needless to say, we managed to find a gas station, and ever since that day, I live by this rule of whenever you're in the Southwest, do not let the gas gauge get below half a tank. Always have a gallon of water. And so since then, regardless if we need gas or not, whenever I see it get to like a half a tank and we have an opportunity to fill up, I pull in and I get more gas, because the last thing I want is to get like stranded on the side of the road in the desert. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's better safe than sorry. I don't know what he was thinking that day, but in hindsight, it's still pretin hilarious that it happened. I think, anyways.
Yeah. I remember another thing too, man. We stopped at like a rest stop, like there's like, out in that part. I forgot what highway that is, but it's like, they have these rest stops where there's nothing there really, just like a place to go to the bathroom basically, and like,
Yep.
like a picnic bench or something. And I just remember like staring out into the desert, into this, like thinking about like how lethal that was. I'm like, man, I'd be fucked if I like walked out there. Within 2 hours, I'd be dead. I'd probably just be like this husk, like I drop. You know what I mean? It just, I would find my demise out there is what I was feeling. That one time I remember there was like this kind of like an SUV with like a skin on it. You know how like people they skin things and put advertising on it, and it was like some an MTV like skinned vehicle. And they were like broken down or something like that at this rest stop. And I was like, wow. Oh yeah, you know why? It was because it was around South by Southwest. That's what it was. So there was all these people.
Oh yeah.
All these people like going to like Austin, and there's like you'd see bands and random people on the highways, and it was like some MTV like skinned SUV that was heading towards South by Southwest or something. And it was just like, I'm like, man, good luck. Like, hope you guys have water and plenty of electrolytes,
Yeah, that's the thing. I've always been fascinated by the desert too. Like, I don't know why, but like driving through it, I really like that scenery, even though I know it's just completely just death out there, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I just find it like soothing and calming looking, as opposed to like snow and ice. Like, I fucking hate looking at snow and ice.
Yeah, I agree with you, because it's just different. You know what I mean? Like, I spent my whole life basically living in the Northeast, the tri-state area. So it's like, I know snow, I know winter, and I know, the type of trees we have here, and the Hudson River and like all that stuff. But so to go to the Southwest where it's like this completely alien landscape is like, to be able to do that a few times a year is awesome, because it's pretty beautiful and breathtaking, really.
Yeah, I've never gotten to see like any of the sites out there, like all the cool like canyons and things like that. I've always kind of wanted to do that.
Yeah,
maybe sometime.
I haven't checked
Who knows?
anything out either, man. It's like I think the only thing I ever really saw was the Hoover Dam from a distance. You know what I mean? And we were thinking on one of the last tours we did last year, we had we stayed in this hotel and we realized that we were like really close to the Hoover Dam, and we were like, oh, let's drive across the Hoover Dam. So we took the van, and then we had a trailer, so we got stopped by the security people, and they were just like, you can't come across with the trailer. It's like, go back. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, we could have loaded this trailer up with explosives and blew up the Hoover Dam, and the amount of devastation that would cause. I'm like, okay, I'm with you on that, man. I get you. I understand, So yeah, I've never really seen. We were at distance, we saw it from a distance.
Yeah, I think that's how I've seen most things too. Is always at a distance, unless like we just had extra time to go around a city or, a day off somewhere that somebody's willing to drive us to a spot. But that's the thing that people don't realize too. I think about tours, like you're really in a van like 85% of the time, and then a venue the other like 10 or 15%, and then the other 5% is just miscellaneous.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's exactly right, man. And like you're driving across something that looks, you could definitely appreciate the different areas of the country, but it's not like, oh, hey man, you guys are going to be in San Francisco. You should go here, here, and here. I'm like, look here, Jack. We're going to show up at the show. Load-in's at 4. The show, the tour, the venue is nowhere near any of these things you're talking about. And like,
yeah,
and then we're leaving, and we're probably not going to sleep in the San Francisco city limits because we have a trailer, and it's just like, San Francisco's a beautiful city, but you never really get a chance to go anywhere when you're there. It's unless you have a friend who can drive you somewhere or like, take you. Actually, in Toronto, Vancouver, actually, we had some friends in that band Bison. I don't know if you remember them, Bison BC.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
The cool thing about it, we played at the Rickshaw up there, and that that's literally, that is in the neighborhood that has that. It's like a junkie neighborhood. It's like one of the.
Oh, I know the Rickshaw.
Yeah, it's like one of the seediest. So the neighborhoods, the seediest areas of Vancouver, where they have like the needle exchanges and all that sort of stuff. So we got there early. We of course you have to be there, hours before the doors start. And Dan from Bison, he's like, hey, I'll come by and rescue you guys from that area. We'll go someplace nice. So yeah, Dan drove up and picked us up, and we went to get sushi like in some nice part of Vancouver, and coffee and like all that sort of stuff. But yeah, mostly you don't see anything.
Yeah, the Rickshaw is one of those places that's like burned in my memory because of just how. I mean, I was appalled at how many needles just littered everywhere around that whole vicinity, and just the tent camp or whatever you want to call it there. And it sucks that people have to live that way, but man, it also sucks having to just like deal with it, with like the possibility of stepping on a needle or something like that. Like, I don't want that.
Well, that was the thing, man. It's like, a lot of how like a lot of dudes on tour, like they'll rock like shorts and flip-flops, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
that's like the look, you just got flip-flops on when during the day, especially in the summertime. So there was this big thing about like the tour managers, like, hey, look, guys, like we're playing this place tomorrow. It's like, make sure you don't have bare feet or wearing flip-flops, because there might be a possibility of stepping on a needle and contracting the AIDS virus. So it was just like, I'm like, okay, point taken, man.
Yeah, it was like, I forget what year that was we were there, probably like 2009 or 10. So I had never really seen anything to that extent in my life before, and then it was just like a very stark bit of reality that just slapped me in the face, and I was like, oh shit, like this is a real problem here. I've never ever seen anything like that until I moved to Washington, that is, and then I was finding heroin kits pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, that's a problem in Washington State, isn't it? It's like
yeah, it's really bad, man.
The Northwest in general has like a big heroin like scene up there, from what I understand.
Yeah, meth too now. Meth has made its way up there, and it's just equally as bad.
Meth is everywhere, though, dude.
Ugh.
It's like, you know, the Midwest, the South, everywhere. It's like you see all these like public service kind of billboards everywhere. Even if you go to a gas station, it's like, you know, these like anti-meth, you know, anti-opioid signs that, you know, they'll be like some dude's mouth with like fucked up teeth, you know, and they'll explain to you that this is what happens when you smoke crystal meth or something, you know. It's like not so much here in like the Northeast rather, in like tri-state area. It's not. I mean, I'm sure people smoke meth around here, but like, I don't know if it's a thing the way it is in other parts of the country. You know what I mean? But it's always trippy when you see that shit.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I realized from traveling, man, is you just kind of see like different ways people live and, you know, different things people struggle with, and it's just like, you know, you think you have it bad where you're at, and then you see somebody living way worse, and it's just like, all right, well, maybe this place isn't so bad.
Yeah, so actually, you know, it's sadly we haven't really the only thing we had booked right now as far as tours go is just that Bloodbath thing that we had just recently get canceled, which I should be on right now, actually.
Dude, I know that sucks so bad. I got an email about that tour and was supposed to like do an interview with the Bloodbath dudes, and then like probably 2-3 days later I got an email that it was canceled and all the interviews are off, and I was like, fuck, because I knew your band was going to be on that. I was like, oh, that sucks. And then the weird thing about that is, so I had just listened to that podcast episode you did where it was just kind of you by yourself talking about that tour getting canceled.
Yeah.
And I just got done listening to it right when you hit me up about doing this, and I was like, that's just fucking weird. Like, how does that synchronicity work out?
I'm trying to like fill my time with stuff to do now that the tour's kaput, you know? So it's like,
Yeah,
that I'm like, it made sense to try to do something cool, like while I'm, you know, trying to fit things in, you know what I mean? And yeah, dude, it's like, it's bad enough. It's, you know, for us, it sucks obviously because we had to we only had like 8 dates like happening, and 4 of the dates were the Bloodbath thing. So it's like there was this gigantic hole, and for logistical reasons, you know, just like, you know, we have to rent a van, and like the thing got canceled like just at the last minute basically. So having to reorganize all that stuff, it just was prohibitive for us to do the dates we had booked already. You know what I mean? And aside from the Bloodbath dates, and but you know, as bad as it is for us, it's like I can't imagine. I imagine Bloodbath has lost like tens of thousands of dollars on this thing. If you think about it, if you think about flights, because they started out on the West Coast, there's like some fest dates out there, so they flew from, you know, Europe to California, right? And then they flew from California to like, you know, whatever, Maryland, and then back to Europe. So there's like 3 sets of flights they lost money on. There's like all the merchandise bill. I'm sure like that's not a small number either, you know. And then,
oh, no way.
yeah, I mean that band probably moves a lot of merch, man. So it's like I imagine they had like, you know, a ton of stuff ready to go for these dates, because, you know, a lot of these days, like just Maryland Death Fest itself is like you could sell thousands of dollars of merch just at Maryland Death Fest, you know what I mean? And like that's all sitting in a box somewhere, you know what I mean? And that realistically, that box might be in the States somewhere. You know what I mean? Like that box of merchandise, there might be 2 boxes. There might be a box in California, and there might be a box in Maryland that has Bloodbath merch written on it that, who knows, maybe they'll just hang on to it until they try to come back here again or something. But that's all money spent at this point. So it's like, it's a real drag, man, you know. But, you know, getting over it. You know, those guys definitely took more of a hit on it than we did. So I look fortunately for us.
Yeah. I mean, at least you, like you were talking about in your podcast, you kind of see like the silver lining to it. And that's not always an easy thing to do. But, man, just expecting to do that one thing and then it just going away is always hard to deal with.
Well, you know, part of it too is like, you know, there's obviously like, you know, the business side of that, You know what I mean? And then there's like
Yep.
the actual side, which is like the reason why you play in a band is to go out and play shows and express yourself with like your, you know, the thing that you do, like your purpose, you know. And it's like, you know, I was gearing up to like fulfill like my purpose this week, you know, and now it's just like I'm just like hanging around, I'm doing this and that. I got like, you know, nothing really to do. I mean there's always stuff to do, but it's like I was gearing up to do something else, and now it's just like dead space, you know. So it's kind of a drag. But that silver lining is like the silver lining, which there's a show in August that we just got offered, and you know, we were offered prior to that, and we had to not do it because of this tour. Now we're able to do it, and I'm so tempted to talk more about that, but if I say something now about it without it being announced officially by the other band, it's like it would be, you know, and it wouldn't be that cool. You know what I mean? So I'll keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what band it was, and I still haven't been able to crack that code. But
I mean, honestly,
that's cool though, man. That you still get to do that show. That is the silver lining right there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. I mean, I look forward to playing shows, but it's very rare that I get excited. And this show, I'm very, very excited about because it's something. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, we've played with Neurosis before, and that was a bucket list thing for me too, because they're like one of my favorite all-time bands. And this band is on par with that, and it's not Neurosis, obviously, because like, you know, we've played with them a few times. But yeah, it's like it's on that sort of level for me. And I mean, I imagine in the next few weeks they'll probably announce it because the show's like in August. So I imagine in June they'll try to put the tickets on sale and all this stuff. So yeah, it'll be announced in the next few weeks, I think.
How is the scene kind of thriving in New York? Because I know I was up there in December to see those Dillinger shows, and we actually ended up going to St. Vitus to see High on Fire as well.
Oh wow, cool.
And it just seems like there are just shows happening all over New York. Like we were hearing about like the show over at this place, and then show it over at this place, and it was just like, is there really that much going on there all the time, or is it just kind of like the season happened to be that many shows?
Well, those Dillinger shows were in what, December, I think? Is that when they were?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's odd that many shows are going on in December in New York. And honestly, I mean, yeah, it's a major city, so it's like there's always stuff going on. But there's definitely been dry spells when it comes to extreme music, I think. You know, but then again, New York City is always on every tour schedule. You know what I mean? Every A market tour goes through New York City, so it's like you can see like, you know, Morbid Angel. You're gonna see all those bands. You're gonna see the Neurosis, you know, lineup, the tour come through, and yeah, I mean, it's you know, definitely spoiled, you know, for having access to all these shows, and you know, because like there's other parts of the country where nothing happens. You know what I mean? Or you have to drive to different places to go see shows. Like our new bass player Randy, he lives all the way up northern Connecticut. That's like on the border of Massachusetts, and he's like, yeah, he drives like hours to go see shows. He'll go to Boston, he'll go to New York City. You know, there's like, he's like he can't walk down the street and go see any bands play, which, you know, is kind of the case in some major cities. You know, it's easy to get kind of like spoiled by that. But yeah, there's a fair amount of stuff going on in New York. As far as like actual bands, there's a lot of good bands. Like Imperial Triumphant's amazing. I mean, that's like one of the better. I mean, they're not a new band by any, but they're a band that's like starting to kind of come to prominence, I feel, and they're like one of the best bands.
I agree.
think. You know, they're one of the best bands in the New York area. Artificial Brain is another band that's awesome. They're from essentially they're based out of like Long Island, but you know, they play in the city a lot. And probably one of my favorite bands, like in some ways similar to Imperial Triumphant, because they're complex. You know, definitely more on the death metal side, and incredible musicians, and just like kind of out there like songs. And Very, very great band. Just two of my favorites. And then like New Jersey, there's a lot of bands in Jersey. There's a band called Replicant that's kind of like, definitely a death metal band. They have these kind of like almost, they're very angular guitar parts, similar to maybe Gorguts or something like that. But not really.
Ooh, I like that, yeah.
Yeah, but not really like Gorguts. But like what comes to mind just with the angularity of the guitar riffs is a band like that. And Replicant's awesome. Of course, there's Black Anvil, which are like, my good friends. And those guys are, obviously they're a band that's been around for like 10 years. But they're always writing good material. And they're always like pushing forward, making things like unique within the black metal kind of genre. And then there's like tons of hardcore bands too. There's like a band called The Last Stand, which is like OG guys, like some of the dudes from Shutdown are in that. And my good friend Mike Scandato is the singer in that band, and I do the Necromaniacs podcast with Mike. And
yeah, dude, I love that podcast.
Oh, cool, man. Thanks. I want to do more episodes. I just think I mean more frequently. I'd like to start doing maybe 2 a month or something, but it's schedules are hard to coordinate sometimes.
Oh, tell me about it.
So
my buddy Matt that I usually do the podcast with, him being all the way in Australia, that is so hard to coordinate.
Because the time changes and stuff. It's like different hemisphere. Totally, that's crazy.
I finally figured out how it works. So like where he's at right now, it's Tuesday 5 a.m. or no 7 a.m. Sorry. So they're a day and 2 hours ahead of us, basically.
Damn. That's insane, man.
It took me forever to figure that out because I was always trying to like coordinate times, and he's like, I would get the day wrong. That was the thing I would always fuck up. He'd be like, yeah, we're going to record Saturday. So I'd be here on my Saturday, and it would be his Sunday already. And he'd be like, nah, mate, I'm busy.
You guys got to start using that. What the hell is that universal? Like there's that time clock that's like, where all time clocks are based off of. I can't remember. It's like, it's like right now, if we were using that system, it would be like 1700 hours Z. If you started coordinating your calendars with that, I think there would be no question as to what time you're going to be doing your thing.
I'll have to look into that. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's like some military shit. It's like, or like, if you're going to like launch like a campaign against another country or something like that, they coordinate all of that sort of stuff, all those military operations on that time scale.
Okay.
Some global continental campaign or something. It's all coordinated that way. So your podcast is on par with that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean that's kind of why like I've pretty much all like the interview or when we have guests on, it's only me now because I can't coordinate 3 different time zones. And I'm just like, well, you know what? I can carry this myself. Admittedly, there's been a few times where like I've kind of just like gone through the motions on a few of them because I just couldn't get like anything out of the guys. Like they weren't really interested in having a conversation or anything like that. So, I've had like a couple episodes that didn't go great, but they still turned out okay, I guess. From what other people told me. But yeah, I told him, I was like, hey man, like you are a part of this podcast, but like I don't want to miss out on these opportunities. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to do them by myself. And he was like, go for it. That's fine with me. If I can be on one, I'll be on one, but most likely not going to be able to.
Yeah, it must be tough, man. Like it's harder than you think, like when there's another person involved. And even if you're like proximity wise close, I mean, you got to do Australia. I can't even imagine trying to coordinate that. And then there's funny because there's podcasts out there that I listen to that have like 3 people, like, like some of the other horror podcasts, for example, like, there's this one called Who Goes There podcast that I listen to. And there's like 3 guys, and they all live in San Diego, but I know how hard it is just to get, me and Mike coordinated, and I'm sure they run into the same things, yet they do their episodes every week, which is insane to me. Like they find a way to do it.
Yeah, I was talking to this dude on Reddit a few months back, and I started to do a podcast with him, and it was like a horror-based podcast, and we did like 3 or 4 episodes, and then it just like he just stopped contacting me to do it, and so I just kind of gave up on it. But it was fun. I don't know. I just kind of I like recording stuff, so I was like, hey, I love horror movies. Why not? Let's do this. But yeah, it's so hard to coordinate that stuff, and he's only in Texas, so it's only like an hour ahead of me.
Yeah.
Or us, I guess. But yeah, man, your Necromaniacs podcast. You did the last one. It was Terrifier, and what was the other movie?
Oh, yeah. Just now that it comes up, I just remembered it was Pyewacket and Terrifier. Yeah.
I was really pleasantly surprised by that movie. I'd seen Terrifier already like years ago, but I kind of watched Pyewacket like on a whim, not really knowing anything about it, and man, that was a pretty good movie.
Pyewacket was like probably one of the better films I've seen in a few years, man, because it was like so minimalist too. I mean, there really was like the creature itself, and and it's debatable whether or not there actually was a demon. There's only 2 scenes, and in one scene it's like this weird shadow, and in another scene it's like this kind of J horror style, it's kind of like demon or whatever, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
and you can debate it. Like Mike actually believes that there was a demon, and I don't. I actually think that it was all internal, so I don't know. What's your take on that?
I like the more psychological aspect of it, that the demon wasn't real and she was just kind of dealing, if you look at like the subtext, she was dealing with some kind of trauma, and that was like the embodiment of it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the aspect of it to where it made you think a little bit of like whether it was real or not. I always dig that more in a horror movie than, like jump scares or I don't know. I'm into slasher films, so I can't really talk bad about those.
No, Terrifier is like the new millennium slasher film, man, really, in my opinion. But yeah, I love them too, But the more psychological stuff is definitely my favorite stuff, though, in horror films.
Yeah, what do you think about films that aren't like overtly horror, kind of like, I know you kind of talked about this on your podcast as well with Get Out, like, it's not overtly a horror movie per se, but it's got those themes and feelings, and I guess like what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess kind of the same thing with like the metaphors and subtext of like horror involved in there, but it's not necessarily like a straightforward horror movie. Do you feel like that's going to be like the new wave of horror movies coming out, or is it still always going to be like a mix of slashers and gore porn or whatever you want to call it, that kind of stuff? And
I kind of feel like those films have always existed, though, really. And I mean, let's go back to Silence of the Lambs. Okay, that's like you could look at that as a horror film, or you could look at it as like a police procedural movie. Really, there's like all these forensics things going on, but what makes it a horror movie, I think, is there's like specific set pieces in that. It's funny because I've been thinking about this subject quite a bit over the last couple of weeks about what actually makes a horror film, and it's like you can watch, like a crime film, okay, and something with cops and like the mob or whatever, or even a movie about a serial killer, Now how they actually tell the story, I think, is more what makes it a genre piece than just a regular drama. I mean, there's like certain tropes and like certain set pieces that are present in horror films, and I think that is really what differentiates those films from, like just a drama. So with that said, I feel like Silence of the Lambs is like definitely a horror film because there's things in that are horrific and are presented to you in a way that's consistent with a genre film as opposed to just a drama, So now I think that like that people are playing with that sort of atmosphere a little bit more successfully these days, you know what I mean? Like Pyewacket, it's like Pyewacket could be just a psychological film if you look at it in one sense, but then it also has the set pieces of a horror movie, You know, like even if the demon wasn't real, even if that was just a figment of her imagination, the presentation of it was still done in a way that is consistent with the horror genre. So I don't know, that's just my take on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because like I can't recall besides like that movie what the real like last decent horror movie I saw, especially this year so far. Like I haven't really seen anything else that was like mind blowing to me. Although I didn't see A Quiet Place, I heard that was pretty decent.
I heard mixed reviews about that. I heard some people say it was really cool, and some people hate it. So I haven't seen it yet myself. I want to check it out just to make my own decisions about it.
Yeah. And I think the only movie I'm looking forward to this year, like horror wise, is that A24 movie coming out with Frances McDormand. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's Changeling or something like that.
There's a couple actually. There's Hereditary, which looks really interesting. There's and once again, this isn't. I don't even know if this is like a horror film yet, because I haven't seen it, but it's being packaged like a horror film. Is like You Were Never Really Here. You know, it's like that once again, and that brings up another great example of, you know, Taxi Driver. Was that a horror film? Is that a movie about a serial killer? What is that? I mean, that could have easily been presented like Maniac or something like that. You know what I mean?
Huh.
And like Taxi Driver, if you took Taxi Driver and had someone else reconstruct the narrative of that and made it like, you could make it like Maniac, and Maniac is a horror film, you know? I mean, you think about all the horrific things, especially the end of Taxi Driver, you know? But it's a drama.
That's a good point. I never really thought about that.
Totally. And the reason why I bring that up is because You Were Never Really Here is being kind of pitched as like the modern Taxi Driver. You know what I mean? And and also it's like, but it also is being sort of picked up by a lot of the horror outlets. They're like writing about it, and it's being promoted, you know, through different, you know, that sort of world. You know what I mean? So I'm really interested to check that out. You know, like the trailer makes it look like a horror film. You know?
Yeah, I think the only other thing besides that I'm super like I'm excited about, but I want to keep my expectations low, is the Halloween movie coming out this year.
You know, I'm on the same page as you, man, because it's like I definitely am going to see it. I mean, it's not Rob Zombie, who I fucking hate Rob Zombie films, and it's supposed to take place on the heels of Halloween 2, like as a direct continuation of that, my understanding. And I think it might be good, man. I mean, I'm not a big fan of like, you know, these like sort of reimaginings that happen, but it's like this doesn't seem like a reboot of the series. It's like picking up where the last legitimate Halloween film kind of leaves off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you know who Mick Garris is?
Yes, I do.
Do you listen to his podcast at all?
You know what? I don't, but I think a lot of people have recommended Mick Garris to me, and I think that I should start checking it out.
So he did have on John Carpenter, and they briefly talked about the movie. And I gotta admit, like, you know, he's known to like be pretty straight up and not bullshit if he doesn't like something. And he was like, no, I think they got it. Like they got the tone. They got what I wanted to do with it later on. And he's even like doing the music for the movie too. So if he's that on board to where he's writing the music for it as well, I mean, that's why I'm excited, but I just want to keep my expectations low so I won't be like super disappointed. But I don't think I'll be disappointed, to be honest.
Now I'm even more excited now because John Carpenter's doing the score for it. That makes me even more excited about it because I think like what you said, if he's down, if he's into it, if he's on board with that shit, then I'm like, I got to be on board then too, because John Carpenter created my favorite slasher character, you know, Michael Myers. You know what I'm saying? If he can, that's my favorite all time slasher character. So, seriously, you know, to be honest with you, more so than like Jason Voorhees or Leatherface or any of those others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like the daytime scenes in the first Halloween film are like by far like the creepiest, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, it's, because that was the thing that later horror movies ended up doing the opposite, was you only ever saw them at night.
Yeah.
And it was rare that you ever saw a killer out in the daytime, and it made him seem a lot more real, that this guy was stalking the streets in the daytime. He wasn't a boogeyman like he later became in the later sequels, you pretty much only ever saw him at night in the later movies.
Yeah, and they got crazy with the stories, you know what I mean? And he became this basically like a zombie, really. I mean, he was like unstoppable, like this weird monster. And the creepiest part about Michael Myers in the first two movies was just going back to the first one, which is my favorite, where he's like, when Laurie Strode is walking home, it's like when he just kind of steps out behind her, like two or three blocks away, it's like this like idyllic suburban environment gets turned into like this nightmarish kind of, just by him stepping out and just being this almost nondescript guy who could be like, like a repairman or some dude who like cuts lawns or something, because he has that work jacket on, and he's just, the mask obviously differentiates him from that, but it's like he looks so ordinary in some ways, and transforms this neighborhood, which is like, suburban safety, secure. Nothing ever happens in the suburbs. Everyone just goes home and, they have dinner together, and this whole, like narrative that you take as being true, the presence of this like psycho killer, stalking this young girl through the streets of that neighborhood is like completely changes your whole take on what that environment is like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the time it was made and came out too was really, really ahead of its time. If you think about like it being out in the 70s, I mean, that was game changing. If you look at most of the other stuff that was out around that time, it was all serious, super serious dramas. It wasn't about like a guy going around murdering people in a small little, suburban neighborhood.
Yeah, and it's like, it's just like, yeah, like this brooding, like the brooding vibe of those daylight scenes are really, that's what really wins me over with that whole, that movie and the character and that sort of stuff. And the funny thing is, like, you remember the end where she rips the mask off of Michael Myers?
Yeah.
The guy, it's just a regular dude under there. It's just, there's no makeup. The guy's not wearing any makeup. It's just a guy with a regular face. People will maintain that he had this horrific face. But I saw this, I forgot, one of the documentaries, or it was like an extra or something like that. They interviewed the guy who played Michael Myers back in the first, I can't remember his name either, in the first movie. And he's like, yeah, I didn't have any makeup on. It was just my face. And, it's a little funny because everyone will say that I was this deformed like guy, but I didn't have any makeup on. It's just your mind.
Yeah, he just looked like a very large dude. That's about it. He just had a very prominent size to him, and that made him equally as scary.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And, I love John Carpenter's musical output too. So I'm excited that there's going to be like record probably that's released soon with like the score on it. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's kind of like, after I listened to that, it kind of changed me. Like, I was already like, I was on the fence about it, but I figured like Danny McBride, and his heart's in the right place, I would assume. And then, when they showed the first couple pictures, I was like, damn, okay, like they're making this look way too cool. I don't know. We'll see. And yeah, I don't know, I guess just hearing it from him, I was like, all right, I'm going to get excited, but I'm just not going to hype myself up about it too much.
Yeah. Danny McBride, surprisingly, is like a big proponent of the genre, man. I think he did a pretty good job in the Alien film too. I
agree.
Yeah, I mean, that movie had its flaws, but I thought it was pretty good, man, to be honest with you.
I think so too, man. I don't get what it is why everybody wants to shit on like the Prometheus and the Alien sequels. Like, I don't know what everybody's expecting. Like, do they just want more of the same, like Aliens? Or, I mean, you can only do those movies so many times. And
I like
don't know.
Prometheus particularly because it kind of goes into that whole like panspermia idea of like, you know, this intergalactic origins of the human race and that kind of stuff. That it touched on that, and anything that has to do with that is like totally on board with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of the problem. People didn't really want to think about like the philosophical kind of ideals of that being a possibility of our existence, you know? Just like a little bit too much of a thinking movie.
Yeah, it might have went over a couple people's heads, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
You know, probably the people that went to the films that were texting on their phones probably missed the point of that. You know what I mean? It's like a big pet peeve.
Oh man, I was about to say that annoys me to no end. Just people that fucking and they bring kids too, and they bring kids to the movies. Yeah, I'm one of those guys that just like if anybody's making a noise, I'll just be like, "Shut up, stop what you're doing."
Well, Mike and I went to go see the Blair Witch in the theater, in this theater in Brooklyn called the Pavilion, which was like in its final days. Like it got bought by Nighthawk Cinema, which is awesome. It's like Nighthawk is like a similar to the Alamo. You know, it's like this kind of you know, curated you know, really cool experience where there's like you can order food and hang out that's comfy, and there's like a chair where you can sit that's like not, you know, have some dude like right on top of you, you know what I mean? So Nighthawk bought this theater, and the Pavilion has been around for, you know, I used to love going there, and then the last few years they just like it just fell into like disrepair, and so Mike and I went, and I literally felt like this might have been the last day it was open because there weren't even like they had removed the rugs in the theater, and they didn't have all the seating in place either. They removed all the seats, and there were just these like weird, almost like living room easy chairs that people were sitting on. It was like so bizarre. There was no trailers. They weren't playing any coming attractions, and there was no music. Like, you know, like when you go to sit down in a movie theater, the lights are kind of dim and there's some, you know, music playing. We just literally walked into this room that was like dimly lit, no rugs, these weird chairs, no trailers, and silent, no music. And there was like it was me and Mike, and then like these two other, just like three, I think there was like three people came in, and like 5 minutes into the beginning of the first you know, of the film, the person literally started talking on their phone.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, get off your phone. Like I did that, you know what I mean? And she's like, I'm not on my phone. I'm like, yes you are, because I could fucking hear you. And it was just like, you know, that like there's other people around you, you know what I mean? It's just like have some sort of common courtesy. The movie was terrible though.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw Blair Witch. It was garbage, I thought.
The original one or that sequel / remake?
Came out. Yeah, the one that came out like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was very, very terrible.
Yeah, I didn't. It was a kind of a waste of an evening, really.
Yeah, there were so many points where I was watching it and I was just like, what are any of these characters' motivations right now? And yeah, I don't know. I just had so many things I started to pick apart, and I was just like, oh man, I am wasting my time watching this, but I'm not gonna not finish it. Kind of one of those people that once I start it, I don't care how bad it is, I just have to get through it.
I'm with you on that, man. Just being a completist, you know, trying to get to the other side is always good.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I
anyway,
think the last movie I can remember that people were talking in, I went to go see Green Room, and there was all these little kids, like younger kids, like they had to have been like 15, 16 years old, sitting down from me, and they're all just sitting there like on their phones taking pictures of each other. And it's, you know, the movie's getting really tense at this point because it's about where they're stuck in the room and, you know, all the bad shit's starting to happen. And I'm just like, I literally walked out and I'm like, yo, these kids are in this theater taking pictures. Can you just get them out of here? And like, I kind of knew the owner fairly well because they used to put on like these horror movies every month and everything. And, you know, you get to talk to him pretty often. He went right in there, told him to get the fuck out. And I was just like, yes,
good,
a win.
Good. I think I look at the youth of today and I kind of feel like we're kind of fucked, man. You know what I mean? It's like a very cynical approach, but I'm like, man, kids' attention spans, they're fat, they're out of shape, they're just, we're fucked. You know, there's no way around it, man. You know?
Yeah. I worry about myself getting in that way too. Like, I'm not like terribly young, but I'm not terribly old either, but I see myself getting in those patterns sometimes, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta be a little bit more mature than this. Like, go out and do something, read a book, get off your phone. It's nice to kind of break away a little bit.
Actually, from the beginning of this year, I actually been reading quite a bit more than I have in the last. I mean, I've always been really into reading, but it's like, you know, with all different forms of media that are available these days, like podcasts, you know, listening, you know, watching videos, like things like that. It's like, I noticed that the last couple of years, I haven't been reading as many books. But my one of my New Year's resolutions this year was to read more books, like actually get, you know, read, and as opposed to just like listening to like podcasts or audio versions of things. And I feel like, in a weird way, it kind of like supercharged my creativity a little bit more. I feel like, you know, I don't know, I've already read like a ton of books since the beginning of the year. And I think that it just kind of opens up like this pathway in your brain to like, it just processes information differently. You know, because people talk about audiobooks and they're like, oh, you know, it's cool. Audiobooks are cool, but there's no substitute for the sort of power that you get from reading the words on the page and having your brain conjure up the images. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a really necessary process that has to happen inside your brain.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, because I grew up like always reading stuff. I know it's my reading is definitely waned over the past couple of years, but even when I was touring, man, like all I would do is like, you know, I know it's not necessarily a book, but I would read regular books, and I'd also read like just nothing but comic books for, you know, a solid 5 years. I must have read like everything that you can imagine. Like, I just devoured it. And then, yeah, like over the past few years, like I've been trying to read more books, but I usually only end up reading like 1 or 2 books a year, and that's it. But I still think that's probably better than most people. If I really had to sit and think about it, I don't think that many people read books.
Sadly, I think I have to agree with you on that. You know, but comic books count.
Yeah.
Comics definitely count, man. I mean, I'm a huge comic book guy too, and I think that, I mean, I attribute some of the early, you know, like my dad used to read comics to me before I even learned how to read. When I was like a young kid. I specifically remember my dad reading Thor comics to me, and lo and behold, I just ordered a Norse mythology book, and it's like, you know, what I think in some ways, like, comics are better than movies because you don't have the budgetary constraints that you would to make a film. Like, say for example, you're gonna, you know, you think about the Swamp Thing, the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, like, stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how the hell are they gonna make a movie out of that? You have like, I don't know, it's like 40 something issues that I think Alan Moore wrote, and it's like, you can never tell that story in any medium but comic books, in my opinion. You know, the way that he did it.
Yeah, I think that's the case with like pretty much all of Alan Moore's stuff.
Yeah.
Especially Watchmen.
Yeah, Watchmen.
Ugh.
Definitely. You know, I didn't hate
favorite comic of all time, but man, that movie is just not good.
Yeah, I didn't hate it, but it's, you know, I mean, definitely the books, the comic books of the Watchmen comic was far superior. But I don't know, I didn't hate it. I just had to look at it as a different thing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's sequences, especially the Dr. Manhattan sequences. I literally felt like he was I don't know, the way he like had that tone of voice when he's on Mars and he's doing that scene where he's like talking about like, I'm in 1940 and this man is here and we're doing this, and you know, that out of sync time memory thing that he does in the comic. I felt like that translated so well to the movie that I was like, this is exactly what I like envisioned. You know, obviously the pictures are there, but even in my head when I feel it unfolding and the tone of voice and how he's just completely disinterested in everything that's going on except for these flashes of time.
Yeah.
The movie captured that perfect, but there's other things that just failed, and the ending was not right.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, but it's also the other thing too is like, you remember in the comic there was that other narrative that was going on of the kid reading the comic, of that storyline with the raft and, you know, the shipwreck.
Yeah, the Black Freighter.
That's it, the Black Freighter. I couldn't remember the name of it. That's fucking awesome, man. That would, and you know, I know that they would never be able to do that in the movie.
Nope.
That would just be like, you'd have like a 5-hour like movie or something. And that goes to what I was saying about comics being superior to films, because it's like, you know, you could do like a 5-issue miniseries that would probably take about 8 hours to make into a film. You know what I mean? And it's like, you'd have to make like a TV show out of it, and then that in and of itself puts limitations on what you can do, budgets and all this other stuff. You know, especially if it's like, you know, science fiction, or if there's some sort of like element to it that is like technological or magic or supernatural to it. You know, you'd be constrained by how budget you'd have to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm always on the fence with like whatever's going to happen with the Sandman stuff, because I don't think it'll work as a movie, and I think it'll work a little better as a TV show, but even then, like, how much better, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, you know. So where can people like find you, man? Like, as far as like website, iTunes, like all that sort of stuff.
Well, I actually just got done redesigning our entire website and our whole art direction, so it's all more in line with what I want to go with, like the look of the podcast. So the website is heavymetalhistorypodcast.com. From there, you can find links to iTunes, Spotify, or you can literally listen to the episodes right there on the website. They're streaming on there. Facebook is at Heavy Metal History, Twitter is at Heavy Metal Pod, and Instagram is at Heavy Metal History. So pretty straightforward across the board there.
Cool. And there's also the Dustin Wildcard Instagram account.
Yep. If you guys want to follow that, you can just see me post memes and sad stuff and me getting stuck in the rain all the time, apparently.
And
yeah, I don't really get on my personal social media too much, but feel free to follow it. I don't care.
And for Everything Went Black, it's everythingwentblackmedia.com. You can also catch the Necromaniac stuff on there too. And similar to Dustin, it's you can stream the episodes on the website, or you can check it out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, like all your normal podcast listening stuff. There's an Everything Went Black Facebook. There's Mike Hill. Oh, that's not correct anymore. I just recently changed my Instagram handle to Everything Went Black _ Mike Hill, so you can find me there. Yep. Twitter, Mike Hill HQ, and I think that's it. Facebook, Everything Went Black, and there's also me on Facebook as Michael Hill, and that's pretty much all the spots.
Yeah, you guys definitely need to go check out his podcast. I like his perspective on things. And, you know, when you have your interviews, man, like the one that got me hooked on your podcast is when you had Stavros on.
Oh, yeah.
That dude is so cool. I love listening to him talk. And, like, the fact that he came on my podcast, like, twice, I was just like, yeah, he's a cool dude. Another one you did was, like, with Eric Rattan. That was awesome. And, what was his name from Whoa?
Oh, Chris. Yeah, Chris.
Chris, yeah. That was a great one too, man. That was such a good one. Yeah, if you love heavy metal, you have to go check out his podcast. So hopefully you guys will enjoy both of them now.
And likewise, if you love heavy metal, you have to check out Heavy Metal History. And like, one of the things that I'm most impressed by is the attention to detail and just like the sheer like hubris that you have for like trying to do what you're doing, man, because it's like, damn, that's like a huge undertaking, man. It's like the it's a pretty epic undertaking to try to chronicle all these things. And now, especially since you said you're just picking these years, it's a lot of work, man.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it was important, man. I mean, the only thing I knew was like one other person had done it, and it was in book form. And I was like, well, let's do an audio form, and hopefully I can figure out ways to make it interesting and maybe funny and keep people's attention. So that's the goal, anyways. And so far, it's working out pretty good. So
Right on, man.
Dude, it was awesome to get to talk to you again. I'm fucking stoked we did this.
Totally,
we'll have
man.
to do it again sometime.
Yeah, thank you for taking some time and doing this, and it was a lot of fun. And thanks everyone for listening, and hope to see you guys soon.
Be excellent to each other. And
Party on, dudes!